I said, so some of my favorite companies, Discovery and DreamWorks, right? And don't you think that when you see the DreamWorks sign, you're like, oh, I know I'm going to love this movie. It's going to be great. So actually, that would be an interesting question since you were just recently at Turner and now you're at DreamWorks. Tell us a little bit about the difference between those two companies and the cultures and thoughts about that.
Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, good. First of all, good evening.
Yeah.
I think I'm shocked that all you guys are coming out. I'm like shocked and honored and all of that. So thanks for coming. Okay, and by the way, I can't claim any of that amazing magic that just happened because literally this is week 2. My team did the sizzle, but that was before I came. So I can talk a lot about what happened at Turner and sort of the reasons why I went to DreamWorks. And it's definitely very different. Like I said, this is week 2. I would say that Turner is based in Atlanta. And I think because of that, there's a little bit of an entertainment. I would say there's a bubble that makes the culture very different than a typical entertainment company. And it's a little nicer, a little, the Southern hospitality sort of culture filters its way into the organization. So it was very process oriented. Turner has a lot of heavily analytical based folks, so there's process and there's a way of doing things. DreamWorks is the exact opposite. DreamWorks is very much a creative driven organization. So it is really about the talent. The talent drives a lot of the great movies that you guys saw that make $300, $400, $500 million, global box office. And so it is not necessarily the most process driven organizations. It is the DreamWorks gray, as I have heard. And so you have to be very comfortable living in an environment that is a little bit more chaotic. You kind of throw very smart, bright people in the room with a challenge, and somehow you just go figure it out. That's the DreamWorks culture. So very different. I knew that beforehand, though. I did do my homework, and I would say that that's part of why I'm excited about doing the DreamWorks sort of position, because I've done a lot of the process thing, for a while. So it's kind of fun to sort of jump back in and feel, I guess, a little bit more entrepreneurial.
Well, I figured the cultures would be different, and obviously you have to weigh those things out. And any person that's going to be successful in the job market will weigh out what's the culture like, and is that a culture for you, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So, yeah.
That's a huge part of the homework I think anybody would do in terms of making a decision for where they decide to spend a lot of their time, right? I mean, we spend a lot of our time at work. And hopefully it doesn't feel like work, it feels like you're having fun. And so the people that you work with, the environment, the culture, all those things are critical in terms of doing the due diligence before making decisions, for sure.
Sure. So just to remind you all, we're going to go through sort of a number of questions, and we'll open it up to questions from the group as well. So I know that as I was reading through some of the material with respect to you, you talked about the importance of having a mentor or role models. So talk a little bit about that in terms of, first, just how did you get them, and how important was it or is it in your mind?
Right. Lots of different levels of mentoring, I think. I mean, first and foremost, I'd say the first mentors are probably my parents. It's like mom and dad. You kind of saw the model of what what success could look like. So it certainly started at home. And some of my family is like, hello, fam. But yeah, I mean, absolutely, parents first. And then, I think they did a really great job of creating or helping me to be a confident enough person to say that I could sort of jump off a cliff and figure it out. So I definitely thank them for that. And then once you decide to jump off a cliff that they might not have any idea what the heck I do, then you really need mentors that are in that space that have dents in the helmet already that can sort of help you. And actually, I can pretty much still name the ones who helped me along the way. Pretty much most of my career, they're usually women, even though there have been a lot of men as well. But I will usually no, not now. Now I'm old and I'm covering the grays, and so, but back in the day, 20 years ago, I would always look at a woman who was like maybe 3 or 4 levels ahead of me, and I kind of liked that person's style. I saw her, how he or she managed in the, in the meetings, how they had respect, how they balanced the work-life thing, how they dressed, lots of taking notes. And the ones that I sort of said, okay, I can sort of see myself being that person. Then you get up the nerve to either pop your head into their office, send them an email, send a phone call, whatever, and say, hey, is it okay if we go to lunch? Is it okay? Actually, you usually start with a coffee. It's less of a time commitment if you ask someone for coffee. And I don't know if I ever was as cheesy as saying, hey, will you be my mentor? As much as you just create a natural connection and you try to keep them going. So I'd say in the past I looked at mentors in a way of helping to figure out how I should navigate through an organization. But then I also would say that I have my own sort of, I'd say, informal board of directors, like over the years, and it's very diverse, but it's probably like 5 or 6, different people who I will go to when I make big decisions, big life decisions, to sort of say, okay, what's your input? What's your input? So sort of like your own little internal board of directors, and I keep them, throughout the years.
That's a great idea. I've heard other people have really talked about that in terms of having a board of directors. I had a colleague that said that, this was a guy though, who said, I always try to get somebody that's, at my level, somebody that's below my level, somebody that's above my level. I'm always trying to get input from people about these kinds of events. Right. And I think it's also, you probably still do that, I would imagine. And I think that's the misnomers that you're going to get mentoring and then that's it. And actually, we find out that a lot of people still want mentoring as they continue to be very, very successful like yourself.
It's funny you say that because I literally, so I had a board meeting with SCAD in Savannah last week, and the meetings were over. This board is made up mostly of probably like 50 plus white males. There's a few younglings like me who's close to 50, okay, but I'm considered young. So after the meetings, and we're all sort of talking over wine at the end of dinner, and one of the execs sort of turned to me and said, "So who's mentoring you?" Because we talk a lot about the mentoring that I do, with a lot of the SCAD students, because I tend to hire a lot of them. And it kind of caught me off guard. I was like, well, because I was telling them about this new job, I'm moving to the West Coast, and, it's very different, and sort of I have to think, it's like, all right, after this, what would be the next, the next step for me? I have to really think hard about it. And so he asked me, said, well, who mentors you? And I was like, well, actually it's kind of interesting, because the ones that I would normally go to, they're actually retiring now. And so I looked at Jim and said, I think I might pick you. I'm going to take you to lunch. Because, he's right. I mean, I sort of forgot that fact of, what, I'm so focused at this point in my career. Usually my door's being knocked on and I'm doing the mentoring. But I'm not necessarily, I haven't necessarily been mentored that actively myself. I'd say probably the last 5 years or so. And so it gave me a little gentle reminder that I need to sort of re-engage with people in that way.
I like how you said how you showed the initiative to go approach people, because I think that sometimes we're tentative, and particularly women are waiting for someone to come to them. And I think that's great advice, because people don't just come to you a lot of times.
Most of the time they won't come to you. Let's be clear. And I will tell you, I get very passionate about our style of leading, and the fact that there's a lot of women that just aren't comfortable leading. And you just got to get out there. I'm telling you, it's like your peers, your male counterparts are out there constantly, I think, way more comfortable in the role of, aren't I great? Okay, that job that's supposed to be a stretch job? Okay, has everybody read Sheryl Sandberg's Lena? Okay, I think that's required reading. for absolutely anybody that's about to graduate. And actually, even if you're in the workforce, that book is so spot on. Because what will women do? Most of the time, we won't reach out for that stretch job. We'll say, oh, well, I'm not ready yet. I need to, we talked to my mentor about it, and, I'll put my 3 years in now, and then maybe I'll be ready for that job. Whereas the guy who came in probably 3 years your junior, he's already had that conversation. He's already had lunch with the boss and said, I'm ready, give me the chance. And you know what, a lot of times they'll get it. So I absolutely, believe passionately in the fact that you have to take risks, you have to speak up, you have to be real clear, but especially if you're working for someone else, you're not an entrepreneur, you gotta be real clear with what your expectations are. It's like, hey, guess what, when I come in the door, you hire me, I'm not coming in because you're hiring me for this role. I am here because there's a trajectory that I'm expecting, and let's talk about that trajectory before I even come through the door. So it's almost like setting a tone, but then you got to do the work, right? I mean, you got to deliver. Otherwise, you're gonna be like, get the trajectory. Right? I mean, so first and foremost, you got to deliver. You got to put darts on the board, and that's usually what I tell most new hires, because they'll come in and. God bless. There's a passion and a hunger, they'll always ask. I take lots of meetings with young people, and I think like the reputation is okay. She might be hard to get a meeting, but she really does meet with you. So the list is always like really long of young folks that want to come talk to me. And most of the time, they're always asking for, well, how do I get to this level? How do I get to where you? I'm like, do the work. You got to do the work first and foremost. You have to really do the work, and then you cannot be afraid to ask and manage the expectations of the people around you. That says, I'm willing to take risks, and I want you to think of me when it comes to that next move. But do the work.
So that gets us to actually some of the advice. I think that's great advice, right? So what are the tips do you have in terms of maybe advice, and would that vary for people? Because we have people here quite diverse in terms of experience and age and that sort of thing. So any specific advice for younger people or maybe career people? Or
right, just in terms of managing their career? Well, first and foremost, get in a role that you absolutely love. I mean, you gotta be really passionate about what you do, because you're gonna spend a lot of hours doing it. So that's first and foremost. I love what I do. I don't think it's work. And I get everybody around me to get excited about what I do. I mean, that helps me too. Like, my kids are really passionate about what I do. So that helps when they're all sort of engaged and they can understand it. I mean, I even had business cards made for my son. He's my assistant chief marketing officer. Troy's my ACMO. I just made it up. I just made this shit up. I just made that roll up. It's like, okay, my department, hey, guess what? We make the business cards. Okay, well, I'm at a role now that I'm just going to start doing some stuff. Okay, we're going to make some business cards, and Troy, you're going to be my assistant chief marketing officer. So when we do our, focus groups and things like that, I'm going to yank him out and let him sit in there, and he does. And then we'll sit there and we'll look at early episodes of things, and all of a sudden the lights will come up, and Troy's kind of like in a little hot seat, and he was the audience, right? He's who we're marketing to. So all of a sudden the creators will say, Troy, what do you think? It's like, whoa. Okay, I'm engaged. So, anyway.
And he's in 9th grade now, right?
He's in 9th grade.
So you started this when he was like 3 or what?
Troy was like 6 years old.
See, I know. I mean,
yeah, 6. But I mean, first and foremost, you gotta love what you do, right? I mean, I'll talk all day long about what I do. Because when you love what you do, then you're usually really good at it, and you're willing to continually put that 10,000 hours. You guys read that, the Tipping Point 2, the book about the 10,000 hours? I really believe that too. It's like you get really good at something if you love it and you're continually doing it over and over and over and over and over. So that's first and foremost. 2, you need to have a really strong network of people around you, particularly if you're a woman and you're wanting to, right? We're all women here. And you want to get into one of these lead roles, these chairs. They aren't easy. They demand a lot of time, and they expect you to be there. Men tend to have, most of the men who I work with do not have spouses that work. Most of the men have women who are stay-at-home moms, and they are managing the household, the family, while they go off and do, right? So it's harder, it's a lot harder for women to be able to produce, perform, you know, all of that, and try to manage, you know, the home at the same time. So it's not easy. But you have to have a network of people around you. Those are two. I'll start with those two.
Okay, all right, great. And then, have you seen, because you've been in a lot of, I think you told me earlier that you have, in situations where you are surrounded mostly by men, so do you see a lot of differences in terms of communication styles, negotiation styles between men and women, and do you have any thoughts about, you know? Okay.
Yes, on all of those questions. Yes, it's funny too, and it depends on the industry. Like when I was at Mobil Oil, before it was ExxonMobil, I will tell you, I remember, you know, having to go in and make presentations. All the new, like, business grads, the MBAers would come in as a class, right? You'd come in and you were supposed to be the number cruncher. You would do these financial analyses, and you would have to go into the boardroom and actually sort of present it. And I would see sometimes where the guy would present it, and they just would be listened to a little differently, even though the woman said the exact same thing. Why is it that, you know, the dude says it, you know, all of a sudden it's being taken more seriously. So, you know, you take note sometimes on how to create gravitas, you know, like executive presence. I am always very strategic, you know, about messaging. And I say that to women all the time, particularly the young ones that are coming in sometimes. You know, about dress, you know, that your clothes make a statement, how you speak, you know, I'm not apologetic. You know, a lot of times women will talk, you know, do this, or, you know, I mean, all those cues are important.
Sure. Well, and there's, I think, many of you know, that taking courses in some of this area, you know, there's a lot of differences, and I think you're giving great advice about how should women sort of project more self-confidence, and how should they not use all these edgy statements.
Right. Be confident, but be yourself too. I mean, I think there's nothing worse than, you know, than a woman trying to lead like they think a man, you know, or how they think they're supposed to lead, as opposed to what's natural to them. Like bring your whole self. I mean, the older I got, the more comfortable I got with that statement. You know, about, look, bring your whole self to work. I'm not going to self-edit. Because when you self-edit, you're leaving some interesting aspects on the table that you could be bringing to the office and being, you know, being more productive. And I think people are more appreciative when you're authentic. You know, so I'd say, you know, be confident in the idea of bringing your whole self to work, and don't be shy either of confrontation. You just have to. I think you sometimes just have to be very strategic about how you manage that confrontation. Because you don't want to end up having the label of being the emotional woman. You know, oh my gosh, you know, she's being emotional. And I have seen that, like in a big room, where to sort of like quiet a woman down is, I feel like you're getting very emotional about this. It's like, wow, okay. So, you know, note to self, I don't want to ever be labeled as that emotional one, but you can certainly figure out ways of managing and dealing with and confronting you know, conflict. And that depends really on the organization too, in terms of how you do it. Like at Viacom in New York, oh man, it's like the meetings were like sparring. It's like, you know, you had to be ready to stand your guard, defend your position. You know, Atlanta, totally different. It's passive aggressive. You know, passive aggressive. No one ever wanted to say anything against you in the big room. That's what we used to always say. Oh my God. You know, you're in the big room, you don't want it, you know, so it's all about the pre-meetings. Who cares about what the actual meeting? By the time you get to the meeting, everyone's already knows what you're going to talk about. You've already done all your internal negotiations with people, and everybody's just nodding by the time you get to the meeting. So, you know, you just have to, you know, different companies are handled different ways, and you just have to be, you know, cognizant of that when you're, you know, in the workplace.
She's giving some good ideas for the kinds of training or skills that people would certainly want to have and strengthen for themselves. And the fact that cultures are very different, people really need to look at what it's like in the culture that, you know, the company that they're working for. So you've had these great opportunities what about the challenges or sort of the sacrifices or things that we can learn from those? Not that we want to be demoralized.
Yeah, no. Okay, but I think I always struggle with making sure there's balance. You never feel like you're given enough time, to all of the stakeholders in your life, right? So the challenge of allowing yourself to not be perfect is real hard for us as women, right? But you just have to let it go. You gotta have to let it go and sort of say, I'm gonna enjoy this ride because I only get one. So I'm gonna have fun along the way. And so once you have that sort of, I guess, philosophy, it's a little more freeing in terms of saying, well, it ain't all gonna get done, and it's not all gonna get done perfectly. I'll never forget one of my mentors when I was at Pepsi was a woman named Brenda Barnes. And she was the chief operating officer at the time. She was the highest ranking woman at Pepsi. And she had 3 kids. And I remember looking, and this was before I was married, before I had kids, but I remember, sort of looking at her and saying, God, how can she do it? How is she able to do the career thing? And, having 3 kids. So I remember being brave enough to, have a coffee with her. And I remember asking her that question, and I remember her looking at me and saying, Brenda, there's no such thing as having it all. There's always going to be gives and takes and sacrifices, and for me, that sacrifice is sleep. That sacrifice is sleep. But the other thing she said was she was very pragmatic. She's like, look, I'm at a certain level where I have a driver. And that driver takes me from Greenwich, Connecticut into the city. During that time, I get an hour's worth of work done, and I do this and I do that. So basically she's saying, look, you just need to be, you need to figure your thing out, but realizing there's going to be gives and takes. And so I knew that I wasn't going to necessarily, for example, have kids when I was really young, because I wanted to at least make enough money that I could have a nanny. Right? I mean, it was real practical, but I felt like I needed to have that sort of flexibility, as opposed to having to leave the office to get my kid from daycare or something like that. So I knew in my head mentally that was one of the checkpoints, for me was, okay, I know I need to be making enough that I can have that flexibility of better, more independent childcare. As an example.
So people always ask the question about balance, and you're talking about balance.
Yeah.
So, I hear you saying I think we don't like to use the word balance anymore because we know it's sort of unrealistic, really. And you said that one of the things you said is, obviously you have to sort of change your expectations
Right.
for the people around you in terms of, does it have to be that clean and, those kinds of things.
Right. But I did think I've actually achieved a pretty good balance, because my level of expectation of what's perfect has changed over the years. So I'm enjoying things a lot more. I'm not really worried about, oh, well, crap, that doesn't get done. That's really not that important on my list. I'm going to spend time with the kids. And, opportunistically, whatever else is on that list, okay, it gets done, it gets done. But the most important thing is happening. I'm spending good quality time with my kids or whatever. I don't think there's ever, any woman that's going to say that they've been able to adequately spend time doing all the things that they, that they want to do. But, you figure it out. You're more forgiving of yourself.
So if she said sleep, what would you say for you? I mean, do you have hobbies or personal interests?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I run, I work out, I'm a big reader. I'll do the whole yoga Pilates thing in the morning. Usually phase 2 of work is when I'm on the exercise bike, right? So that way I can leave at a fairly reasonable hour. I can do my iChat thing with the kids, and we can talk about that.
Yeah,
as far as me being in a different
that.
city a lot of the time when they're off. But then I'm able to sort of get back into the work thing, but I'm working out at the same time. So, I'm all about dual tasking. That just works for me. I think I have a pretty high energy level, but again, it's because I love what I do. So it's not like, it doesn't feel like a grudge, like I'm trudging through something. I actually enjoy what I do, so I don't mind taking a look at emails that I might be getting from the international, like I get a lot of West Coast, when I was on the East Coast, I would get West Coast emails and emails from the, like our European partners and stuff, like in the evening. So, I'm on the exercise bike and I'm finishing up emails or something like that. So you just got to figure out how to juggle it. But yeah,
But you're trying,
I work hard and I play hard.
Yeah, well, I think that fitness thing though too, you talked about that and how probably important that probably impacts your energy as well. And one of the things that Brenda was telling us earlier when we were meeting is just that she's on one coast, her kids are on another coast, and how to manage that. And then just talk about though your reading with your son, because that's interesting,
Yeah.
It's a good way to fit something in, it's important to you.
Well, and the other thing too, I'll tell that story, but I think it's also it's when you get into the level roles that I'm in, I think it's really good to actually demonstrate it so that the younger women execs know it's okay. Because that's the thing that I have found over time too. When I leave at a reasonable hour, like when I first started, I'll tell that story in a minute, but I think this was important about balance and Joe. When I first started at Viacom, I was scared to death. The woman that I was going to work for, I had heard that she was like the Sex and the City lady. Okay, this was back when Sex and the City was on, and it was popular and all that. I'm like, well, what the hell does that mean? They're like, well, she's real glamorous, she works out, she does the heel thing, and she's always there at night. Like, she works so late that she orders dinners. And I'm like, oh, this isn't going to be good. I was really kind of worried. I got to know Jessica pretty well, and when I said to her, but what I realized is that she starts late. She's not a morning person. Jessica strolls in 10:30, and I'm usually the one turning the lights on because I'm a morning person. So I went to her office. I'll never forget. It was probably like 3 months in. I went to her office and said, "Okay, Jess, I need to tell you something." I said, "Our group, surprisingly, is a lot of women, a lot of young women, and they have young moms." And they are freaking out about the fact that you're staying every night till 7. So how about we tag team? I'm the early girl. I'll turn the lights on. You turn the lights out. She had no idea that her behavior of wanting to, of just being a late night person was causing this ripple effect of angst through through our group. So she was appreciative, and it was sort of like, okay. And then all these, the younger women came to me like, thank you. So after that was probably about 10 years ago, I started being much more demonstrative about doing balance type things so that my staff and others knew it's okay to do it. So for Troy, we do this iChat thing every night, where if I'm not there, it's like usually we will read a chapter of a book. He'll do a couple pages, I'll do a couple pages. And, first we'll go through the homework type stuff, but then we'll read a chapter. And so I freaked out a little bit, to be honest, about working on the West Coast. It's like, okay, wait a minute. I'm still going to be at the office, and it's going to be bedtime for Troy. What am I going to do? So I went to my boss, went to my assistant, and said, okay, here's blackout time. This is Troy time. It doesn't change. It's not, guess what? It's embargo time. There's no meeting that's going to cover it. So from 6 to 7 West Coast time is Troy's bedtime, and that's going to be my iChat time. So, and guess what? All of a sudden, I start getting these little emails from, from other staffers that are like, I think that's fucking amazing. So it's like, so now they feel a little bit more like, okay, that's okay. Okay, she's in her chair and she's doing that, then that means that it'll be okay for me. So I tend to like to show signals of balance as much as I can.
No, I think that's a really good point, and I think we forget that people watch people as they're up in organizations, and then they take their cues from them with respect to, I've had a lot of people say that.
No question. Because I remember watching carefully. Remember, that's how I started. It's like I was looking at, these women who are few, but I forgot. But now I'm very much cognizant, of the fact that, people all around the organization are looking. It's kind of exhausting sometimes, to be honest.